Good afternoon and evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us on our Matrix Detox webinar with Dr. Stefan Kuprowsky. Dr. Kuprowsky, he's a Canadian naturopath practicing here on the West Coast. He's been in practice for over 20 years, and in addition, he works as a consultant, a writer, a lecturer, a radio host, and a teacher in the naturopathic health or in the natural health industry, including at Boucher Institute of Naturopathic Medicine. He practices in both Vancouver and Gabriola Island. What makes Dr. Kuprowsky an expert in the matrix and matrix detoxification is that he's an innovator who brings leading-edge diagnostic and treatment techniques into naturopathic practice. He was one of the first Canadian doctors to integrate the use of German vega testing, and that's a non-invasive allergy testing method, and uses live blood microscopy for in-house diagnosis and nutritional status. He's also incorporated the biological terrain analysis, which he'll be sharing tonight, as an in-office test for blood, urine, and saliva to determine body acidity, free radical pathology, and metabolic function. And with all of these different techniques and his years of experience, he will be able to share why matrix and matrix detoxification is so important for us in practice. Okay, so with that said, Dr. Kuprowsky, I'm going to hand everything over to you.
Okay, welcome everyone. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is the matrix. And the matrix is a concept that really underlines German biological medicine, which I've been practicing actually over 30 years. And this is has become kind of the underpinning of my practice. So tonight's lecture is going to be in two parts. The first part is going to be talking about the kind of the concept of the matrix, and then the second part will be really the clinical application of how you apply concepts of matrix and toxicity into a consistent detoxification program that I call matrix detoxification. Okay, so single-cell organisms have a direct relationship with the environment, and so they are interacting directly with the environment. Multicellular organisms have a buffer zone, which is what we're calling the matrix. So cells exist within a multicellular structure, and the matrix is kind of a buffer between the external environment and the internal environment of the cell. The original concept of the matrix, it's now being called the extracellular matrix, and for convenience, I'm just going to refer to it as a short form of the matrix tonight. So the original concept was that the matrix was full of connective tissue, and that this was basically structural proteins that had no relationship other than providing kind of a structure for cells, tissues, and organs. The new concept of the matrix that we're going to talk about tonight is that the matrix is actually a living tissue that is very much integrated with the rest of the cellular structures in the body, extending, as you can see, into the membrane and into the nucleus of the cell. The extracellular matrix, or as I said, I'm going to talk about it as the matrix, forms a three-dimensional net or sieve, if you like, in which it controls all inputs into the cell and outputs in the form of toxins and waste materials. So all nutrition that is going into the matrix into the cell has to go through the matrix, and all waste products or toxins that are leaving the cell go through the matrix as well. So the matrix becomes a very busy place. So we're going to talk now about the basic structure of the matrix. There are three basic protein classes that make up the matrix. The first one are the structural proteins, collagen, which gives it its strength, and elastins, which give the tissues flexibility. And so, you know, the collagen makes up all the tendons and the fibers and ligaments of the body, and these are all existing as well in this structural web called the matrix. Second class of proteins are proteoglycans, which create kind of a gel, and their main function is to really hold water, and we're going to see the importance of that as we proceed through this. And the third class of proteins in the matrix are adhesive glycoproteins, and these attach the various tissues and, for example, collagen fibers to the membrane of the cell. These are called fibronectins and laminins. So there are many, many functions of the matrix. We're going to look at it later as the three-dimensional kind of filter. As well, growth factors, hormones, cytokines, information molecules are all passing in and out of the matrix, and that gives one of the major functions of the matrix, which is communication, and we're going to again come back. That's a key thing. As I said earlier, all the nutrition from the bloodstream is passing into the capillaries and is being dumped and presented into the matrix. So all the individual amino acids and sugars and essential fatty acids, as well as oxygen from the capillaries, before they enter the cell, have to pass through the matrix. And of course, there's the mechanical functions, and one of the most important functions is this sense of auto-regulation, that the matrix really, as we're going to see here, can be considered an organ system unto itself. It's never been looked at this way, but when we look at the actual functions of the matrix, it's functioning as probably one of the most important organ systems in terms of support in the entire body. So collagen is a very abundant protein in the body. It actually makes up 30% of total body protein content. So that's a very high number. It's secreted by fibroblasts or chondrocytes, and as we can see here, it has the importance of this. It has a triple helix structure. Individual collagen chains are called alpha chains, and they bind together, forming these triple helices, and then they bundle together into fibrils, and then finally fibers. One of the most important features of collagen is that it has a crystal structure, and again, we're going to come back to this crystal structure in looking at some of the electrical properties and vibrational properties of collagen. Here we have on the left the triple helix of collagen, and surrounding each alpha fiber here are molecules of water, and we can see that as well on the right here in the white is the hydroxyl radical, and then the green are the hydrogen. So collagen itself is surrounded by water, which adds to its electrochemical properties. The second class, the proteoglycans, formed this gel-like substance between the cells and collagen, and it kind of fills in the space. And it links with collagen to form kind of a system network in the entire body. The proteoglycans, it's not that important. It has a central protein, and then attached to it are these what are called GAGs, glycosaminoglycans, and at the top is a hyaluronic molecule. And this attracts water tremendously. So water is very, very important in the regulation of the entire matrix. Okay, so The collagen fibers are surrounded by water, and they form an electrical connection, and we have an electron and a proton. Here on the right is we have the proteoglycans gel-like net with the central protein, proteoglycans, and then there's these gags which form a web-like net surrounding it. And as you can see on the furthest right, water is completely embedded in this matrix web. And we also have a negative charge to this whole field, and that's going to become important later on. So the this web is full of extracellular or interstitial fluid, which in which is floating all and transported all the fatty acids, the sugars, as we said, the information molecules are going in and out of the cell. So the matrix creates a homeostatic regulation between the intracellular and the extracellular zones. And so the three most important functions that this matrix is providing is nutrition to the cell, waste disposal away from the cell, and creating a communication network that makes it possible for the entire body. Every cell can communicate with every other cell in the body through this electrochemical grid that is formed by these structural and gel-like proteins. So here we have a picture, histological picture of the matrix itself, and the darker lines are collagen, and then we can see the fine network. Here's a close-up of this kind of fibrillar structure formed by the proteoglycans, and this is a kind of a gel-like substance that is surrounding the collagen fibers. And here we have this area. These are the actual body cells itself. This could be a skin cells. This could be a dermal layer, and butting up, or any other tissue for that matter of fact, and butting up against it is what we call a basement membrane that is connecting the matrix with the cell itself and the membrane. So here we have a schematic of what's really going on inside the matrix. So we have the collagen bundles, which are all formed of individual collagen fibrils running throughout the matrix. We've got various cellular components of the immune system, macrophages, neutrophils. Here we have capillaries, which are bringing oxygen to the cells, and of course, oxygen gets released and goes through the matrix into the cell. As well, we have elastic fibers formed from the elastin. We have this big yellow thing is a nerve passing through this area. And then on the right here, the most important that we're going to emphasize is the lymphatic vessel. So that's where the waste products are transported from the cell through the matrix into the lymph vessel for elimination, and then the capillary brings the nutrients to the matrix, and then they diffuse into the cell. So the matrix itself can be really seen as a functional unit, and it really functions as a independent organ system in the body. And so everything from the capillary through the connective tissue, which is the matrix, right up to the cell membrane, is the extracellular matrix. And bathed in this web of matrix fibers is the extracellular fluid, which contains all the nutrients and the waste products. Hormones are connected through the capillaries. The matrix is connected through the peripheral nerves that we just saw. And then we have in a very elaborate communication system passing through the matrix all these, what I call these information molecules or infokines. They include, prostaglandins, cytokines, lymphokines, neuropeptides, proteases, which really create a biofeedback system of the entire body. So the entire body is really, every cell and every tissue can be in communication with every other cell in the body. And this really forms the basis for what we now know as the mind-body connection. So this is an intelligent network that is communicating with itself and receiving feedback constantly. So we're now going to focus on the, this most important quality of the matrix is that the matrix is, by the very virtue of the structures, is allowing for cell-to-cell communication to exist. And collagen itself is a semiconductor, which means it can conduct electrical charges. Electrons are conducted through the collagen fibers itself, and electrical gradient is created with protons and hydroxyls, which is formed from water throughout the collagen fibers and the proteoglycans shell itself. And so these transfers of charges are vital to life itself. And the electrons that are available from the matrix is a very basic, fundamental antioxidant system of the body. It can neutralize free radicals. And we're going to see very shortly the importance of the matrix in detoxifying various types of chemicals and toxins. So the matrix itself is an electrical grid, and we learn in physiology, communication occurs, mainly through, two methods, through the nervous system, through electrical charges, and through the hormonal system. But really, the matrix is a much more fundamental and older communication system that is only now beginning to be recognized for its importance. So the matrix itself has various electrical properties. The collagen fibers here are liquid crystals itself, and can resonate frequencies. It's a semiconductor for charges. Piezoelectric means that physical stress creates an electrical charge, and that's how the matrix remolds all the bones and the muscles of the body is through this constant feedback system of pressure translated into electrical signals. Pyroelectric means that hot and cold changes in the body can also create electrical charges and signals. And the whole system is really an electrical grid. So the old conception of cell communication is where we have a hormone or an antigen locking into a receptor site. But now our understanding of the matrix as an electrical grid is that the communication is much faster than what is possible through either hormonal communication or nervous system communication, that the body is in touch with itself through electromagnetic signals that are going from one cell to another. So we're just finishing up this first section. I just want to review kind of the key figures in the development of the matrix concept. The first one is Claude Bernard, and we know him as the father of experimental physiology in France, and he opposed the germ theory of Louis Pasteur, and he invented developed the term in French, le milieu intérieur, which means the interior terrain or in the environment. And we now know that this interior terrain is the matrix, is the extracellular matrix of the body. So he is the first one. Schussler, we know him as a famous homeopath who developed the Schussler salts, but what we don't know, he was also a professor of physiology, and he talked about connective tissue, and he was the first one to really recognize. He referred to connective tissue, which is the matrix, as he actually called it the matrix where the most secret currents pass. And so that to me is kind of a poetic foreshadowing of what we now know of the matrix. Probably the most important person in developing this concept was a German physiologist by the name of Alfred Pischinger, and he really elaborated this concept of the extracellular matrix, which he called it the ground substance or the ground regulation substance, because it really regulated the entire physiological and homeostatic functions of the body. And he described this ground substance or matrix as an amorphous gel-like substance, which we know is the proteoglycans part of the matrix. So his concept here, this is in Spanish, but he saw the ground substance or the matrix, he called it a morphofunctional unit, in which the capillaries released the oxygen and nutrition directly into the matrix and presented it to the cell membrane. And then the waste products came from the cell into the lymphatic system and then would go through the detoxification organs of the kidneys, the liver, and the lungs. So Pischinger wrote this book called The Extracellular Matrix, Ground Regulation, Basis for Holistic Biological Medicine. And so this was translated a few years ago into English from the German. And I read this book, and I can tell you it's an incredibly dense theoretical book. And if you ever have insomnia and you want to put yourself to sleep rapidly, just keep this book by your bedside. It is very, very dense, but the ideas are really revolutionary. So Pischinger saw really that when the doctor would talk to the patient would really present the signs and symptoms which he called kind of were the tip of the iceberg. But really what the job and the role of the physician was to determine what the underlying causal factors are, and that's really the health and the ability of the matrix to regulate the rest of the body. So this was the hidden part, and which really determined the signs and symptoms of the patient. So here's kind of a summary of Pissinger's view of the matrix. It constitutes 20% of the total body mass. It's a fifth of our bodies. And so it really is an organ system unto itself. It has an electrical set point, which is of 250 microvolts, which is very sensitive to environmental changes of acidity, of stress, of inflammation, of toxins. So the matrix itself is a regulatory organ, and when the matrix is healthy, the rest of the body is healthy. And when the matrix gets dysregulated, then that dysregulation shows up as dysregulation of body organs and body cells. And so it's really the battlefield for the defense system of the entire body and immune system. It is in direct contact with every single of the 3 trillion cells of the body, if you think about that. And that if your nutritional inputs are healthy and balanced, the matrix renews itself every 120 days. And so that's an important number to remember. That's about 4 months. And so when you have a patient who is very, very toxic, who is very nutritionally depleted, you really have to think about 4 months as being kind of a minimal set point where you start going to see some significant changes in the body systems and body health. Another German, Hermann Heine, he's famous for, he saw acupuncture points as projections of the matrix going up to the surface of the skin. And so he conceived the acupuncture meridian system as really going through this crystalline collagen structure of the matrix. And so we now have an understanding of how acupuncture may work, and as well how homeopathy works, is through this resonant communication system of the matrix. Another PhD, Mei-Wan Ho, here's her article. She wrote about the crystalline water structures aligning with collagen fibers in the fascia, which is the matrix, as forming the basis for the meridian system of traditional Chinese medicine. But probably the individual who we have the most to thank for our most recent ideas about the matrix is James Oschman. Oschman is still alive, and he lectures widely on the matrix. And his concept, he calls the matrix the living matrix, because it's really an alive system that is running throughout the entire body. And the living matrix is composed of the extracellular matrix, the intracellular matrix of the cell, and then the nuclear matrix of the cell nucleus. And that most toxins are stored in the extracellular matrix and directly impact on the cell itself. So here we have Oschman's concept of the living matrix of this extracellular network in communication with every one of the 3 trillion cells of the body. There's a couple of books that he's written. Energy Medicine has actually come out with a second edition of this. And so this is the theoretical ideas about the matrix, and then this is the therapeutic application of matrix concepts. The matrix has gone through various name changes over the years. Bernard called it the terrain. About 100 years ago, they referred it to as mesenchyme, and you can still see some of the older homeopathic works referring to mesenchyme. Kind of, you know, most biomedicine and biology calls it just connective tissue. Pischinger called it the ground regulation substance, and it's now known as the extracellular matrix, and Oschman calls it the living matrix. So, in summary, the matrix itself is a highly functional unit that creates kind of the background for an elaborate communication system in the entire body, and that it is directly involved in regulating the milieu of the cell itself and the entire regulatory network of homeostasis in the entire body. And so it responds to inputs, and it responds to what's going on in the direct environment of the body. So diagnosing matrix, you can diagnose it, using traditional Chinese pulses and looking at energy of the various meridian systems in the body. I've spent most of my career doing electrodiagnostic testing. The original one was Vol. It was refined and simplified by Schimmel, another German. Vol was the original developer of these electrodiagnostic machines. And then we have, we literally have dozens of them in existence today. I've used most of these. I have a Prognos sitting in my office on Gabriola, and I have an Asira sitting in my office in Vancouver. The other diagnostic machine that I have found most useful in diagnosing kind of the health of the matrix is another German machine called the biological train analysis, and it measures 3 body fluids, and it measures the blood, urine, and saliva, and it measures the pH, measures the redox potential, which is basically electrons and protons, and the degree of free radical stress in the body, and then electrical resistance, which is an indication of minerals. So this machine, so we put in blood, urine, and saliva, so we get 3 values, so we get 9 numbers. This doesn't arrive at a diagnosis of a disease condition, but it arrives at a very accurate estimation of what's going on in the matrix itself. These machines are somewhat costly, and you can do a simplified version through just pH assessment using pH strips, and we'll talk about that. Another way is something called computerized thermography, which we're not going to get into tonight. So we're now moving into the second part, and we're going to talk. So now we're going to talk about clinical applications of matrix detoxification. So Oshman saw the matrix accumulating toxins in 3 ways. The first way is through a direct, mechanical trapping, like it's a filter. The second is through ionic bonding of positive to negative charges. So a healthy matrix has a negative charge, and most toxins have positive charges. So that positive charge of the toxin will bind with the negative charge of the matrix. And then the third one is through water, hydrophobic and hydrophilic binding. So again, a lot of toxins are fat soluble or hydrophobic, and the liver, through phase 1 and phase 2 converts them into a water soluble metabolite, which then gets eliminated through the matrix. So toxins are always passing in and out of the matrix as they go through various detox organs of the body. So pH is the first area of toxicity that we're going to look at. We know that health is determined through alkaline foods, and as the body becomes more acidic, the matrix itself becomes disturbed. And the matrix is that when we're measuring blood and saliva, what we're really measuring are indirect measurements of the acidity of the matrix, and that's where the the matrix itself is a huge repository for toxicity and acidity. So it's really, if you have a healthy matrix, it's able to temporarily store and process and eliminate these toxins. But when the matrix becomes acidic, then it slows down the ability of the body and the matrix itself, body's detoxification system, to eliminate toxins themselves. So the matrix stores toxins in the acidic state and eliminates them in the alkaline state, and that's basically is kind of resembles and indicates, health status. Healthy body is alkaline, and unhealthy body is acidic. So abnormal pH is an indication of dysbiosis in the gut. And as the matrix becomes more and more acidic and is unable to process and eliminate that acidity through, the various organs, through the lungs in the form of carbon dioxide, through the kidneys, and the liver, the matrix itself becomes dysregulated and starts to become more rigid. So the flexibility and the viscosity of the matrix, it loses that and becomes more hardened. So the first thing we need to do for anybody who's toxic is to diagnose the degree of acidity in the matrix. And so we use pH strips to get an assessment of acidity from the saliva and the urine. But really, these are indirect measurements for the acidity of the matrix, because if the matrix itself is very, very acidic, it's going to dump a lot of acids in the urine. So you're going to see higher or lower pH, more acid urine first thing in the morning, because the body spent the previous night processing and trying to eliminate acid. So the first part of our matrix restoration program are some sort of alkaline salts, and we've got the German one, the Pleoalkali powder, and we've got the Biomed basic powder, which they're both combinations of magnesium, potassium, sodium, alkaline minerals, which help to absorb that huge well of acidity that is being held in the matrix. The second system that we're using are the Sanum remedies, Citro, which is citric acid, and this is important for metabolite detoxification of acidic metabolites through the Krebs cycle. So citric acid is a very important part of the Krebs cycle. Pleosanuvase is L-positive lactic acid, and that helps the mitochondria, and it helps eliminate lactic acid, and it prevents lactic acid from moving on into lactate itself. And actually, it was interesting. I was just reading, apart from kind of the German literature on the benefits of L-positive lactic acid, I was reading an article yesterday, which they're actually doing some physiological studies with athletes, and it's showing that having lactic acid in the muscles is actually a good thing, and it doesn't necessarily get converted into lactate. So lactic acid doesn't cause muscle pain and cramping, it's really lactate that's doing that. So oxidative stress in the form of free radicals damages the parts of the matrix, the GAGs, the glycosaminoglycans, and can become kind of the origins for the development of chronic inflammation and chronic diseases such as cancer. We know that a lot of cancers actually now have their origins in the matrix. Vitamin C is very much involved in the formation of collagen, and vitamin C itself is probably one of the most basic and best antioxidants that we can use in the body. It's not made by humans, and so I in particular like vitamin C powders, and the right C is a particularly efficacious form of vitamin C that is, if you haven't tried it, it works, I find, much better than most forms of ascorbic acid. The GAGs start to break down from trauma, infection, and toxins, and really these breakdown of these protein products can initiate allergies and autoimmune responses in the body. As well, too much sugar can glycosylate the proteins in the matrix itself and start to cause early aging and degeneration. So look upon the matrix as the first line of defense against stress. So anytime the body goes under a stress, it causes a temporary depolarization of that 240 microvolts, which, if the matrix is healthy, is immediately able to repolarize through the the electrical charges that are being held within the collagen tissues itself. Where we run into problems is when the stresses overpower the ability of the matrix to repolarize itself. And so it starts to lose its structural integrity, and instead of being a viscose, flexible, elastic gel substance, it starts to harden. And this is kind of the beginning of aging, the hardening of the arteries, the brittleness of the bones, really originate from these changes that are occurring inside the matrix itself. So whatever is going to happen to the matrix is going to happen to the rest of the body. It's going to happen to the arteries, it's going to happen to the heart, it's going to happen to the brain itself. So chronic inflammation really originates from dysregulation of accumulation of stress inside the matrix. So the problem clinically is, how do we diagnose these short-acting stresses that come from hidden foci of infection or toxicity in the body? So in summary, the matrix is the site of metabolite and, from the cells, and toxins from the outside, heavy metals, chemicals, and form a buffer zone where it can properly metabolize and send off for elimination these accumulations. And stress can be seen in the form of physical stress, because the matrix itself responds to physical stress, chemical stress, biologic, electromagnetic. So when the matrix starts to become toxic, it develops areas of toxicity that we call a focus. And a focus is really an unresorbable particle in the matrix. So I can see I need to speed up a little bit. We're coming to the end here. So so the focus is an area of toxicity, whether it be bacterial, viral, and the causes of focus or unresolvable areas of toxicity are numerous, including root canals, drugs, surgery, environmental toxins, infections, vaccines, and chronic physical myofascial tension. So in order to treat the matrix, we need to go through systemic detoxification of the various processes. So the first place we want to start at is restoring the ability of the matrix to regulate itself and to eliminate acidity. And again, that's using pleosanuvese and pleocitro, the citric acid cycle. Second thing is we need to really restore mitochondrial function. And sanuvese has been shown to increase mitochondrial energy output 350%. So they've done studies showing that giving sanuvese will upregulate mitochondria 3.5 times. As well, we know that CoQ10 is a key nutraceutical involved in mitochondrial energetics. Next area is you need to clear toxins, and you mobilize them using cilantro, and you absorb them and eliminate them using chlorella. So the biomed products for mobilization is Cilantrex and elimination Biorella. So though, you can actually get that protocol from Biomed or from Heather. Restoring cytokine balance. So cytokines are can be either pro-inflammatory, or can be pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. But pro-inflammatory cytokines are the cause of much of inflammation. So you need a systemic enzyme to digest those cytokine byproducts that are continuing to float around not only in the bloodstream but in the matrix. You correct the origins of dysbiosis in the gut, and again, this talk is not about dysbiosis, but probably one of the most comprehensive gut restoration programs you can think about is this intestinal kit, which uses about 8 of the Sanum products. And once you want to take a look at that as really, dealing with dysbiosis, dealing with candida, dealing with SIBO would be a comprehensive gut restoration program. And then the replenishment would be through probiotics once you've cleaned up the gut. Scar therapy is really you're going into connective tissue. Scars are, collagen and entrapment of various drugs that are left, and anesthetics and antibiotics left over from surgery. And you can do this by combining protein with pleonot, which is unfortunately not available at this time, or other drainage ampoules such as pleoform, which is acidicum formicum, which is made from the toxin of the red ant. So if you're not familiar with that product, you would inject a combination of procaine and chloroform into scars, which are preventing the transmission of signals through the matrix. So scars themselves create blockages in the regulatory pattern of the matrix. So the next system would be the lymphatic system to clear. And again, we see the direct connections of the lymphatics with the matrix. And so my go-to remedy is a Nessman product called Lymphodrops. And so these are oral drops that you're really clearing out debris and congestion in the lymphatic system. And when you've got a congested lymphatic system, it's because the matrix has backed up into the lymphatics. And so you need to start that drainage happening in the entire body. And we used to have lymphatic cream, which is just being reformulated right now. But I would use these products in combination, using the cream on the swollen or congested lymph nodes. So for lymphatic detox, you want to look at Lymphodrops, which is a German homeopathic combination for lymphatic detoxification, or LAPA, which would be the herbal version, which contains alternative herbs. So the old naturopaths, would use alternatives, and what they were really doing was detoxing the matrix. They didn't call it that, but in essence, that's what they were doing. And for systemic detox, you would combine the Lymphodrops with the Hepatica, which is the liver detox, and Solidago, which is kidney. So these are the depurative organs of elimination, these three in combination. So you would take 20 drops of each and put them in a liter of water and have your patient drink all three throughout the day. And so that creates a systemic detox. So we're kind of almost at the end here. You can pick up matrix symptoms, which, are things that your patients are telling you every single day: fatigue, body aches, sleep disturbances, irritability, brain fog, headaches. Here we go: sensitivity and paradoxical reactions to nutritional supplements and medications. When things aren't working the way you expect them to, it's because you haven't dealt with the absolute cause of all their problems, and so you're giving them nutrients or drugs, and it's what you need to be doing is reducing the toxic accumulation in the matrix, and finding non-specific skin rashes, just skin rashes that kind of come and go are signs the body's trying to eliminate toxins from the matrix through the skin. So we're pretty much at the end here. There's various, this is kind of my metric, is for matrix therapy is first do an assessment using one of the methods that I've talked about. Start with diet therapy and using alkaline diet and appropriate alkaline powders. Treat the gut and the underlying dysbiosis. Do targeted detoxification therapy on the lymph, the kidneys, and the liver. Have your patient do mobilization exercises to mobilize the lymph through like a rebounder, skipping, or these vibration plate machines. I use infrared sauna a lot, or steam ozone, and then you can get into specific massage therapy like lymph drainage massage.
Okay, great. For any questions that you may have, please type them either into the chat room or into the Q&A section, and then Dr. Kuprowsky can answer them for you. Oh, okay, we have one here. So Jan asks, would PEMF be a good therapy?
Yes. So the PEMF is pulsed electromagnetic therapy. So I didn't mention that, but I do have a unit, and it is really a fundamental therapy for kind of harmonizing and reestablishing proper communication signals throughout the entire body. So PEMF is currently being used very effectively for chronic pain and chronic fatigue. And really, it's another German innovation, and it's another way of impacting on the matrix itself and reestablishing the body's ability to self-regulate itself. So through pulsed electromagnetic signals, you're kind of kick-starting the regulatory capacity of the body itself.
Excellent. Okay, so we have another question here. And just as a side note on the pulse electromagnetic therapy, we have the Reba device, and we also have something called the Reba pad, which is new, and it's not quite available yet. The Reba pad is made by OnDemand, and so it is used in the capacity of Rubimed and Reba testing with the Rubimed remedies, but it also is a pulse electromagnetic therapy machine that does have the capacity, as Dr. Kuprowsky just mentioned, programming to do therapy for chronic pain and fatigue and autonomic dysfunction protocols. So for those of you that might be interested, there is a device that we'll be having that can actually serve these purposes in the near future. So just watch your email for that. Okay, so we have a couple more questions that came through here. And so another question is, in dark fields, what indicates matrix congestion?
Well, I mean, the most basic sign, and I've done thousands of live bloods, is rouleau of the red blood cells. I used to go to health conferences years ago, and I would bring my dark field and set it up. I would have a booth, and I would set it up, and I would just take kind of people off the street, and it was amazing how just your average person walking around, how toxic they were. And so they're as soon as the blood starts to clump together and coagulate, you're getting problems of oxygen transfer into the cells, and that's, I would say, would be the most basic thing. I mean, there are a lot of other things that you're going to see with toxic matrix in the blood itself, but that requires a whole weekend to explain that.
Okay, so next question here is, can you comment on mitochondria and its relation with the matrix?
Well, I mean, I give a whole, actually that might be a good subject for my next webinar, would be the mitochondria, because the mitochondria are really the energetics of the entire body. It's intracellular, but the mitochondria itself, began as a separate organelle that was taken into the cell itself. So the mitochondria, depends on the flow of electrons, because the entire mitochondrial process is extracting electrons from the plant sources of food. So when the electrical grid of the matrix, we saw earlier that there's a polarization, there's positive and negative charges. When the matrix starts to become rigidified, becomes acidified, it starts to lose its kind of electrical potential, and it's not able to move electrons either in or out of the cell itself. So, and again, if toxins start to back up in the matrix, if the matrix is not able to move toxins through the lymphatics, then those toxins are going to stay in the cell and start to poison the mitochondria itself. So those are just a couple of the connections, I would say, between mitochondria and matrix.
All right. This is going back to the dark field question. And so what about fibrin formation, or commenting on fibrin and matrix congestion?
Yeah, so the sickest people that I used to see would be cancer patients, and when I would look at their blood, their blood itself would start to develop fibrin almost within minutes of being taken out of the body. And so what's happening is you're seeing the rigidification of that gel-like proteoglycans right in the blood, because what's happening in the matrix is happening in the blood. So that's the whole body becoming more rigid, and less flexible, and it's really coming out of literally out of circulation in the blood and rigidifying literally right before your eyes. So it would be kind of very dramatic when you would see somebody's healthy people. I would keep their blood, and and their blood would look healthy for hours and hours. And the sickest people, it would just start to solidify literally within minutes of coming out of the bloodstream.
All right. So we have a number of questions to continue with. So the next question is, do you work with meditation and affirmations to regulate the matrix, the chakra system, and have you seen these to have a therapeutic effect?
Yeah, I'm, I didn't get into that tonight, but, psychological stress impacts the matrix tremendously. So I teach, I teach mindfulness. When I was doing my my healing retreats on Vancouver Island, I taught everybody how how to meditate and how to cultivate mindfulness. Now I'm teaching mindfulness at Boucher to the students on how to use it themselves and how to share it with their patients. So I would say yes. The mindfulness is going to affect the autonomic nervous system and is going to help establish this rapid response to stress impulses in the matrix. And so that would be another key area of impacting the matrix. I mean, I used to have, I would have patients who were on the most healthy diet. They would exercise, they would, eat organic foods, they would take supplements, but they were not healthy. And what was really going on was that they were not able to manage stress effectively. And that was the one area that they were kind of missing. And so that was kind of like, you know, the missing link in terms of their total health program. And so those people I would work, you know, specifically on meditation and mindfulness.
All right. So moving on to water, do you believe that drinking 8 or more glasses of water is necessary for a healthy matrix functioning?
Yeah, I've done, you know, I've done a lot of water. No, I think, I mean, water is incredibly important, but I've also, you know, like any kind of health fad, too much of a good thing is not a good thing. And so I think you know, I know people tell you to drink a lot of water. I recommend people drinking more water when they're using certain substances such as caffeine or alcohol is when you really need to increase your water intake. So I don't believe in the kind of the artificial 8 glasses of water a day. I you know, somewhere kind of in the middle. So I emphasize water, but I don't, you know, I think a lot of patients, if you give them that much water, they're you know, they're not able to integrate it into their matrix because their matrix is rigidified, and so it just gets dumped in the kidneys immediately. And so, like every other therapy, you would want to kind of start slow and build up with it.
Okay, so we've got a few more questions in the Q&A section, and then we have a few in the chat section, so just finishing up the Q&A. So this is a question just as a confirmation about using systemic enzymes, and they would be indicated with fibrin in the blood, or what you're seeing under dark field.
Yeah, I mean, there are, you know, many indications for the systemic enzymes. I would use it anytime you're having allergies or signs of kind of autoimmune type reactions. You would use it for any kind of congestion and for you know, moving along and breaking down these kind of autoimmune complexes that the body forms starting in the matrix. So if you see fibrin in the blood, that would be probably the #1 place to begin would be using systemic enzymes on an empty stomach, of course, because these are not, we're using these as proteases to break down these antigen complexes. So you would take that on an empty stomach, yes.
Okay, thank you. And now another question here. How do the meridians show acidity, or what is happening in the matrix? I have an accugraph machine that shows meridians if they are excess or deficient. Is there a way to extrapolate the information to the matrix?
Well, I mean, you're getting a matrix diagnosis from that system, and the excess and the, you know, deficiencies are really showing you the dysregulation of the matrix itself. I would say though that you're not going to get direct information about acidity from an energetic test such as the accugraph or electrodiagnostic testing is really not going to give you, you know, acidity is more of a chemical process, and so, yeah, you know, you would need some sort of chemical diagnostic technique. I always combined, I never relied solely on energetic, although I used it in every single patient. I would not rely solely on energetic testing. I would always want to use some biochemical testing in combination with energetic testing. And through that combination, I always got the answer. I would kind of triangulate my questions and my answers, my diagnosis, using energetic testing, using biochemical testing, and then using my own intuition and brain system itself to kind of triangulate on the answers.
I think that's actually very good advice. For sure. Like use your systems, but also use your brain to connect it all together. So not relying just on chemical diagnostics or energetic diagnostics, but taking all those things plus experience to put it all together. So as I said, good advice. Okay, I've got two more questions here. So this is about alkalizing with Alcala and diet. How long would you alkalize with Alcala and diet? Testing of the urinary pH, and for how long?
Well, some patients, I tested hundreds and hundreds of patients, and just doing diet alone, it would switching from a standard American diet into a organic alkaline diet. It would take people a year to change their change their numbers on their urine and their saliva and their blood. So that's when I started to use the alkaline powders to really kind of speed up that process. And so I would use it as long as necessary to absorb that acidic load in the patient. And so I would, I would do it until you started to get normalization of the urine. I would use I would use the powders, and then for say a couple of weeks, and then I would see where does their acidity without the powders, where does it go? Because when you're using the powders, it's going to immediately show alkaline. So you have to do it for a couple of weeks, take a break, retest, and then decide whether to repeat. So that's how I would do it.
Sounds good. I have an article called The Art of Alkalizing. I will make sure that I include this in a follow-up email. And so it gives all kinds of details about how to alkalize and what pH, urinary pH levels you're looking for to indicate tissue acidosis versus normal ranges, and when to be testing and for how long and such like that. So as I said, I'll include that in a follow-up email. Okay, so next question here. Can Biorella and Cilantrix work for all types of heavy metal detox, or is it limited to specifically certain ones or mercury?
Well, yeah, this is actually something I teach. I teach heavy metal toxicity, and I actually teach chelation therapy. For really serious heavy metal toxins, you can't rely solely on the nutritional detoxifiers. The nutritional detoxifiers have a very important role in terms of mobilization, preparation, and as kind of supporting chelation. So they're not specific for any particular metals, but if I would use them in a patient who, for whatever reason, can't do chelation therapy, either it's too strong for them, or they can't afford it, then I would send them home with an intensive program. And again, you've got the you can get the protocols from Heather on using. You have to cycle, and you have to use, if you're using the nutritional, I call them nutritional chelation. If you're using the chlorella and the cilantro as your primary chelator, you're going to have to use fairly significant dosages. So I use them as support in the context of chelation. And then I would use kind of lower doses if I was using it in synergy with a chelation protocol. But if you're using it primarily, you're going to have to go into the ranges that actually are able to mobilize heavy metals. So.
I can definitely send the heavy metal detox protocol out as well using Biorella and Cilantrix. And generally, one of the things that Biorella does is it does bind onto mercury quite nicely. So if people are having amalgams removed in their mouth, there's a protocol as a before and after to help bind onto anything that's been liberated and available in the mouth. And then also it does bind quite nicely to mercury in the gut that's available, and maybe in connection with candida protocols. And so Biorella is not a binder, not a liberator, it's a binder only, and only a binder of what's available, so kind of in the gut and the mouth. And Cilantrix is more of a liberator, but there's very specific protocols on how to use Cilantrix, because if you're liberating, you need to have a binder available as well. And there is some, Dr. Gill, there is some specifics for what Biorella and Cilantrix do. Mercury tends to be the one that they've been studied best with, and don't necessarily tackle the whole big range. That's when you'd be looking, as Dr. Kuprowsky was indicating, deeper into some of the other ketolation protocols and getting kind of deeper in the body. Okay, so I've got two more questions here. And so the first question is, this is going back talking about fibrin and fibrin formation. Do you see a higher clinical value in ESR over CRP to indicate matrix rigidity?
That's an interesting question. I would say the SED rate would probably give you, you would, on the SED rate, you would probably see that would reflect more the rouleau and the clumping that you would see in the live blood analysis, and the CRP, the C-reactive protein, would be more of an indication of the fibrin. So the SED rate would be rouleau, and the CRP would be fibrin. That would be the way I would interpret that.
All right, so that looks like the end of the questions. There's some good ones in here tonight and some pretty difficult ones. So good being put on the spot and actually knowing the answers to some of these bigger questions. Okay, so I'm just doing a quick review here to make sure I haven't missed anything. I don't believe I have. Okay. All right, everybody. So thanks so much for listening tonight to the Matrix and Matrix Detoxification webinar. Also, thank you for some of the really great questions that you asked at the end. And thank Dr. Kuprowsky for giving us such a great presentation on the Matrix and Matrix Detox. It was wonderful to hear all of the wisdom that he shared, and I wish everyone a really wonderful night. Take care and have an awesome evening. Bye-bye.